Greetings. By virtue of your presence watching this video today, I want you to know that we consider you to be an extended member of our family at Unity in Linwood. We believe that you are an individualized expression of that one creative impetus which stands behind all life, and as such we celebrate the uniqueness which you are, and we celebrate our unity with you. We are glad you're with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Roger wasn't here during the first service, and so I just stood. "20 minutes. Me just standing with my paper. Holy Thursday, March 29th. This most sacred and experiential service of the year includes beautiful music, a foot washing ritual, physical communion, candle lighting, and a 12 powers meditation. Please consider joining us. Our 64 Ways and 64 Days Season for Nonviolence program culminates with a spiritual Seder hosted by Rabbi Ted Falcon on the 4th at 6 o'clock p.m. He writes, "The biblical Exodus offers us a rich metaphor supporting our own release from the restrictive patterns of our own conditioned consciousness." Say it again. The biblical Exodus offers us a rich metaphor supporting our own release from the restrictive patterns of our own conditioned consciousness. Tickets are $40. It is a fully catered event. My understanding is that you may secure said tickets by visiting our website or by seeing someone in Friendship Hall following this service. And finally, if you're interested in becoming a member of this beautiful, evolving idea we call Unity in Linwood, consider joining me on Sunday, April 8th, following this service for an orientation experience, a new members reception, which will be held in your honor on Friday the 27th, with new members Sunday to follow. Applications are available at the Welcome and Information Station. Practical Spirituality Welcoming Community. That is a short mission statement, but I think it says a lot. Every week I like to support this with one of these 6 bullet points, which we developed in conversation with your Board of Trustees beginning in late 2014. Take a deep breath. See if this is a place in consciousness, if this is a spiritual value with which you can align. It reads as follows: we believe each person is an individualized expression of divinity itself, and we accept each person as such without exception, without question, and without condition. As a matter of principle, it can be said that we at Unity in Linwood love boldly. Fair enough? Last week we launched a series entitled The Kingdom of Heaven, and as I think back on that first week, I imagine it as a couple hundred people gathered around a giant onion. Chef Richard here, under the bright lights, speaking in something of a French accent, just for fun, as we launched our recipe by peeling away layer after layer after layer. We peeled away a layer called the Kingdom of Heaven as a distant geography, and tears began to well up. And then we peeled away a layer called the Kingdom of Heaven as a future era, and people scrambled for the tissues. And then we peeled away a layer called the Kingdom of Heaven as an anthropomorphic male God streaking down to earth to clean up the countless messes of human greed, fear, and selfishness, instead of just assuming courageous responsibility for the infinite creative potential which is ours by right of being a human being. And you could hear the shrieks all the way in the road. But given the obvious reality that you have returned to my kitchen, hungry soul that you are, I presume that you are at least willing to entertain the possibility that the tears you shed as we peeled away the layers from our childhood mythologies will be recompensed with something tasty. It's my strong belief that you're right. Judaism's most famous rabbi, Christianity's most notable avatar, Jesus of Nazareth, spoke of this kingdom of heaven again and again and again. It was an idea which was clearly important to him. And it's my belief that he was far more fascinated with this kingdom as a model for how humanity can coexist during our earthly walk together than as a model for whatever happens after our earthly walk has concluded. And so it is that through Easter morning I will invite you to explore these kingdom parables again, not from a paradigm in which Yeshua was trying to say something about your life then and there, but from a paradigm in which we come to understand that Jesus was attempting to tell us something about life here and now, because it changes everything. Now, the parable of the leaven, also called the parable of the yeast, is one of the shortest of these kingdom parables. It's thought by most scholars to be one of the authentic Jesus teachings. Both evangelists, Matthew and Luke, both written well after the death of Jesus, of course, you understand. Both functionally anonymous texts which were assigned authorship years later. Both evangelists place this parable of the yeast adjacent to the parable of the mustard seed. And this makes a lot of sense to me. I'll tell you more about that before we part ways this morning. It's written thusly: he told them another parable. The kingdom is like a woman who placed yeast in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. That's the end of the story right there. Short story. Short story. Now, as we discussed last week, these parabolic teachings were meant to provoke us. They were meant to press us beyond ourselves, to challenge our easy answers, to upset our arbitrary conclusions, to confront our habitual perceptions, to unsettle our accepted values. So to arrive at the quick interpretations such as, small beginnings can yield big results. Not untrue. Or how about this one? Good things can come from sour stuff. Again, not outside the realm of truth. Or how about the far less palatable? We are now to go out and convert the other spore people until we achieve something of a bulging loaf of gluten-enriched religiosity. To arrive at such easy conclusions is probably to miss something, because they're quite simply too easy. So let's begin. Are you ready? Take a deep breath. First, that Jesus tells parables with female characters is not surprising at all. The importuning widow, the woman who loses and finds her coin, the 5 wise and the 5 not so wise virgins. You understand, women have been the subjects of these tales since Eve. And given the long history of women as positive subjects in early Judaism, Jesus comparing the kingdom to a woman who bakes should raise no more eyebrows than Jesus comparing the kingdom to a man who plants or to a man who tends to lost sheep. So to this point, what we really know is that we have a person. We have a person, probably a decent person, who happens to be a woman. That's what we know. Now, the yeast refers to what we would likely call sourdough starter. It's not those little yellow and red packets which have been stuck between a butter dish and an old bottle of pickle relish in your refrigerator door since the kids lived at home. I know, it's like I'm psychic, isn't it? Yeast refers to a sourdough starter which leavens flour through a process of decomposition or decay. Now, this term has been used metaphorically some 13 times in the Gospels themselves alone to reference something whose taste is just a bit off. Paul, for example, your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch? Or as he might have said today, according to Amy Jill Levine, do you not know that one bad apple spoils the whole bunch? And he concludes with, therefore, let us celebrate the festival, not with the old yeast of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And at the same time, this term has been used metaphorically to represent much that is positive as well. It was a great Jewish philosopher who wrote, leaven stands for food in its most complete and perfect form, such that in our daily usage none is found to be superior or more nourishing. I would not disagree with this. I would not disagree. For back in the day when children walked to school, I arrived home at least once a week to find a steaming heel from my grandmother's homemade gluten-enriched bread. Cinnamon and sugar crystallizing in that melting pool of what we back then called oleo. But I digress. So let's understand that when Jesus spoke of yeast, it was neither inherently positive nor negative. And then while most modern translations have this woman mixing the yeast into the flour, most scholars believe that the better translation from the Greek is that she hid the yeast in the flour. 3 measures of flour, by the way. You can show me about how much 3 measures. No, you cannot. It's 40 to 60 pounds of flour. So to this point, what we know is that we have a person, probably a decent person, who just happens to be a female, hiding a leavening agent, a benign leavening agent, neither inherently negative nor positive, in a vast, fertile medium. How are we doing so far? Now, in this context, that which is hidden isn't to remain hidden forever. Rather, it was understood that that which is hidden that it might be transformed and one day come forth in new ways. Jesus himself is reported to have reflected this in Luke when he taught, nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed. So what we know is that we have a person, probably a decent person, who just happens to be female, hiding a leavening agent, a benign leavening agent, neither negative nor positive, in a vast, fertile medium, that the thing planted might be transformed and one day come forth in new ways which will stretch well beyond her personal world. This is what the kingdom is like. Now, at the beginning of the lesson, I did mention that both Matthew and Luke place this parable of the yeast next to the parable of the mustard seed. It does make good sense to me. After all, isn't a woman hiding yeast in the flour very much like a man hiding seed in the ground? Both equipped with seemingly insignificant items which, when planted in vast, fertile mediums, might be transformed and one day come forth in new ways which will stretch well beyond their personal worlds. Those stories very much alike. So you see, I think this parable is about creativity. I think this parable is about humanity's unlimited potential to affect life, for good or for ill, both individually and collectively. I think Jesus was saying that a woman who bakes and a man who sews, neither mystical, winged beings from on high, but both human beings, like you, like me, wearing these suits of skin, carry ideas, beliefs, dreams, and desires, insignificant as they might seem, that when planted in the vast, fertile mediums of consciousness or society, will engage resources and initiate processes well beyond our capacity to perceive, to come forth in new ways. I think this parable is about creativity. And I also think this parable is about accountability for those ideas, beliefs, dreams, those desires, insignificant as they may seem, when planted in the vast, fertile mediums of consciousness or society, will engage resources and initiate processes well beyond our capacity to perceive, to come forth in new ways, which will stretch well beyond our personal worlds. You see, I think this parable reminds us that the yeast we hide, that the seeds we plant won't yield their respective crops for us alone, but for other souls seated in this very room, for other souls whom we have yet to meet. One must wonder what yeast of fear might have been hidden by our predecessors for us to be reaping such greed. What yeast might have been hidden by our forefathers for us to be reaping such racism. But today is a new day, and we are a new people. And I believe this parable reminds each of us that we are that woman standing before that Galilean oven, ready to fashion something of a new dough. A dough that rises so clearly, even today, from a new yeast of oneness and equality. As part of our season for nonviolence, it was in '98, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, founder and director of educational services for the Center for Nonviolent Communication, made a visit to the Monroe Correctional Complex. Rusty Thomas, an inmate at the time, was taken with the potential for improving his own life and the lives of many others. Over the next several years, Rusty worked on a program, and on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, 2001, Freedom Project was officially launched. From their website, we read, Freedom Project interrupts the cycle of incarceration with programs that provide healing, connection, and restorative communities for participants both inside and outside prison. Our programs support incarcerated individuals and those recently released through the practice of nonviolent communications, mindfulness, and equity. Our values, we are grounded in the belief that all human beings are precious and have a place at the table. We believe in the power of compassion as a healing force on the planet. We value mindfulness as a way of living so that we act with intention and care. We value commitment and contribution. It's through giving to something beyond ourselves that we create meaning in our lives and express the fullness of what it means to be human. We are committed to integrity in all dealings and will make decisions based upon principle over personality. We're committed to addressing institutional racism and all forms of oppression, and we are guided by the belief that it is our differences, such as race, class, gender, sexual orientation, faith, or whether or not we have served time in prison, that makes us strong. It's this ability to hold differences with compassion and understanding that defines us most deeply as an organization. We dream of a world where each person is held in the circle of humanity, where every individual experiences a deep knowing that all members of the human family belong to and are connected to each other. We dream of communities and nations dedicated to nonviolence as a sole force for the healing of all relationships fractured by injury, violence, anger, and mistrust. Freedom Project offers a new vision of what is possible. How about that? We have two people who are here to speak with us today. What an honor it is. What noble souls they are. I know your welcome will be rich. These are people who continue to plant new yeast. Will you welcome, please, Casey and David?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Oh, the gift is ours. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Freedom Project. Tell us about Freedom Project, please.
It is a dis-ease that is contagious, where we are uncomfortable with how our nation has built a criminal justice system on slavery and racism. And you heard about our founding. We are currently in 7 of the 14 prisons in Washington State that the Department of Corrections runs. We have approximately 70-some volunteers. By the way, our dream is to be in all 14. That'll come. We're growing. I'm busy about it.
We are good dreamers.
Yeah.
We are
yeah,
good dreamers.
I know.
We will support you.
Yeah. I wrote a prayer request the last service for that very reason.
Hold
Because
on.
it was there.
Hold on.
Good. We're ready. It's a learning community. It's a community that has changed my life. I've learned more inside prison about this work than I ever dreamed possible. And I'm accompanied here by a companion who can speak really from his own experience.
Hello, how everybody doing?
Hi, David.
Yeah, I'm formerly incarcerated, and the reality is, I know it's tough for some people to see, but everybody in there has trauma, experienced trauma, come from horrible life experiences, upbringings, toxic family dynamics, and it's like that's a recipe that breeds bad choices, right? And so you make these horrible choices from this horrible place. And when a person is deprived of compassion, love, never seen a healthy relationship in his life, right? And you got all these things mixed together, that's the end result. And for me, it was like it's like in philosophy, right? In philosophy, they say that if all you seen were black crows, you can make the assumption that all crows are black, right? Mm-hmm. But if you just see one white crow, right, then you know for a fact all crows aren't black, and that's what it's like. It was like you have this negative, jaded view of the world, and you have to make horrible choices. Like you have to. And so you have this horrible, jaded view of the world, and the Freedom Project was like my white crow, right? It changes your paradigm. You can't unsee compassion, right? Nice. You can't unsee empathy. It's something when you experience, you know it's real. Then going forward, you can't pretend like it doesn't exist anymore, and so you can't use the lack of it as justification for making bad decisions going forward. So it's transformative. I've seen it impact a lot of people. It's impacted me, but I've seen it impact a lot of people. And part of doing the work, it kind of, especially when you come through those type of circumstances, and then you feel the love and the compassion and the empathy, you want to give it back. And that's been kind of my inspiration. All our inspirations is to give that back. And hopefully show people compassion in a place where they've never seen it before, and hopefully show them empathy, and maybe they can use that as a tool or as a means or the impetus for them to change their life and do better, or to be the best versions of themselves. And that's what I really appreciate about the Freedom Project. It's built on that premise. It's built on connection, and it's a negative environment inside the system, and it's like a positive place that you could be connected in a place that's full of disconnection, right? And so it's kind of a beautiful situation in a bad situation, and it does great work. And I appreciate the fact that they not only helped add value to my life, but they put me in a position where they allow me to give back. And so that's probably the most important part, is now I could be a part of the solution. And giving back, and y'all know, I mean, I can't about, it has its own kind of transformative effects. They said if you want to teach somebody something, I mean, if you want a person to learn something, have them teach it. And so if you want a person to have something, have them give it, right? And so when you give compassion, it just have a transformative effect. And I really believe that I'm better for it. And, you know, I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, we appreciate being with you. You know, it reminds me of a story in which yeast is planted and it goes forth in powerful ways to ripple out and touch lives well beyond our own. It's like that story, really. There we go. And you are a volunteer-run
organization, and
completely full. No more room for volunteers. How am I doing?
you missed the mark.
Missed the mark.
That leaven was old. No, I love the image of Freedom Project as part of God's reign. I love that. I think that's excellent. As I said, we're in 7 of the 14 prisons. We'd love more volunteers. We can always use that. We can always stand behind the kind of restorative and healing prayer power that communities like this can give us. I think what is sustaining is the circular model that David was talking about is, the more one gives, the more one receives. And, it's like, it is like a unity, to coin a phrase you all know. And we always welcome that. We do really good trainings that will enrich your lives, whether you want to be part of us or not. That's not a condition. We just like to share how we're learning. We have 2 preliminary trainings. One is just the introduction. The other one is a wonderful teaching on mass incarceration and anti-oppression, because that's the lens we use as we look at what would racial equity look like, not only in our world, but behind those walls. So, yeah, come on along. We love it.
We stand with you.
Thank you.
I understand you've brought some complimentary materials that you will be available at the Welcome and Information Station for any who would like to engage you in conversation or register to stay in touch. Is that correct?
Please.
What else would you like us to know today?
I shared a little bit about my experience, and I would say that, like what Freedom Pro talks about, the compassion and the empathy and the connection, is that I think it's important to know that there's a whole segment of the world population that doesn't have it, right? And it might be hard, especially if you come in where you've had it and you've taken it for granted, and you believe somebody has somebody, a mother, a brother, somebody. And the reality is, it's heartbreaking when you see that that's not true for everybody. That some people haven't had these things. And when you see that part of people and you start to understand how it's conceivable that they make horrible decisions, right? It's hard to see it from far away, and you see it, you just see the bad decision. And it's easy to make judgments and stuff like that, but when the reality is, when you see the history, the story, the reality is people, when you come up without light, without faith, without all these things that keep us full spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, it's easy to self-destruct. And so all I would say is, just like the Freedom Project is a white crow, your compassion can be a white crow for somebody else. Regardless if it's in a program setting, if it's at church, or if it's at the grocery store. Compassion, empathy goes a long way. And I promise you, the people will appreciate it, especially those that I know society believes might not deserve it, but in most cases, or in all cases for the matter, they need it the most. So,
David and Casey, we're honored by your presence. We thank you. We align with you. We stand in support of you. We are a community that moves fences further out and builds bigger tables. We build bigger tables. Will you thank them for being with us this morning, please? Wow. So there's an idea on the table, and it reads something like this. The kingdom is like a woman who plants yeast in a fertile medium to come forth in ways beyond our capacity to perceive, to touch lives beyond those we currently know. So let's take a deep breath. And if this be true, and if we're willing to entertain such a paradigm, then our question for a time of reflection, our question becomes, what yeast am I hiding today? What yeast am I hiding? And if I'm hiding a yeast that looks like limitation, if I'm hiding a yeast that looks like separation, that looks like lack, that looks like confusion, am I willing to begin again? What yeast am I hiding today? Whether in consciousness or in society, what yeast am I hiding? Is it one that will bear the sweetest of fruits, anchored in those transcendent truths of divine love, profound wisdom, deep peace, enduring love?
Here I am, vessel to be used. Whatever Spirit needs of me, I will be, I will be, I will be.
Thanks again for joining us. Please visit unityinlinwood.org for a preview of all upcoming classes, services, and events, and for an opportunity to make a gift to our community should you so choose. Thank you.